50 further things you didn't know about Diary of a Wimpy Alien.
This time about episodes 8, 9, and 10.
Let's start right where we left off.
Prior to scripting episode 8, we put together a detailed outline of what would take place over the course of the next 3 episodes, both because we knew the story of these episodes was going to be more directly connected than usual, but also because all 3 were set to be produced over the same summer, a new record in speed and planning for the series.
For episode 8, we parodied the Wimpy Kid book, The Third Wheel. Plot lines referenced include the impending school dance, Greg trying to get a date, and both Greg and Rally having interest in the same girl.
The title, The Third Resurrection, was chosen since the Ripley clones are parodies of the clones in Alien Resurrection. The third in the title refers to our heroine, Ripley 3, as the third clone of the original Ripley. They don't call me Rebel Ripley for nothing. We do a lot of flashbacks in this series, primarily in photo albums and scrapbooks, but this flashback was the first time we returned to actual footage from previous episodes.
Quotes from each Ripley are barely visible in the margins of Greg's yearbook. These were initially spoken lines of dialogue in the first draft of the script and referenced actual Ripley lines in the various Alien films. The references were ultimately deemed a bit too obscure to spend so much time on them.
The only Ripley pictured in the yearbook not seen in this episode is stunt double Ripley. That's because we lost her in the last episode.
Jock Ripley's wrestling accident is, of course, a direct parallel to Greg's wrestling accident in the first Wimpy Alien. We were able to open the same visual effects project and switch their places.
This library sequence was one of the few in this episode featuring Alea as Greg. Since she also plays all the Ripleys, actor Cam Becker joined us as Greg for the majority of episode 8. Cam would reappear as Pothole's thug Purvis in episode 9, and reprise the role of Greg for a few key sequences in episode 10.
When Dutch returns, he's accompanied by the same menacing but goofy musical cue that signaled his appearances in War Dog days.
While we've seen the Spag Marines previously, episode 8 finally gave the organization a full name and clear purpose.
Say goodnight, alien!
The hallway Greg and Ripley 3 make their escape down is the andyoufilms office's hallway. It's also this hallway, and this one, and this one.
Ripley torching the lab mix-up abomination of herself is a direct parody of a rather horrific scene in Alien Resurrection. Bonus fact, Alea hated playing lab mix-up Ripley.
Kill me. We've had many CG augmented shots and environments throughout the series, but the school dance was the first completely CG environment. The dancing figures barely visible in the background were actors shot for our least viewed parody series, My Fair Ladies.
Part of the reason episodes 8, 9, and 10 were planned together is that we knew they would all feature the gang of horror morph characters. Their masks were finished so last minute that this footage was shot the day before the episode released.
The reason Jason Morph has the grid pattern on his head like Greg is that we could only fit a certain number of masks in the budget, and Greg and Jason mostly had to share.
Many eagle-eyed viewers were quick to spot Slender-Morph in the gang in question where he came from. He became something of a litmus test to see how many fans watched the Greg Responds series, since Slendy was actually the third morph created when Slender-Man cameoed in Greg Responds Volume 6, after first being spotted with Greg in our parody Slender-Man Homecoming. We anticipated this might be a head-scratcher though, and planned to let the Penny Morph be the voice of our audience in the next episode.
When did you get created anyway? I don't remember that.
The Meltdown was chosen as the Wimpy Kid book to parody for our episodes 9 and 10 two-parter The Smackdown because of its themes of identity, going outdoors, facing your foes, and all-out combat. The Meltdown is very much winter-themed, but working out of Florida, we knew we'd never easily be able to pull off an episode all about winter combat and rivalries, so the seasonal flavor of the story was shifted to summer.
The decision to split the Smackdown into 2 parts happened during outlining. Originally, we planned on episodes 8 and 9 being the big 2-parter with all the horror morphs, but we decided it was best to lay some groundwork first in episode 8 with Spag, the Terminator, and teasing the horror morphs, all while giving Ripley her due. This also meant we could start our big 2-parter with Greg under assault right from the get-go.
Episode 9 marks the second time we parodied our own parody by recreating the opening of the first Wimpy Alien with other characters.
But it marks the first time that original music was written for the series. While we normally license stock music, animator John Mondelli produced this horror-themed variation of the usual main theme specifically for this opening. We'd use it again at the episode's close.
Will made this gag cereal box, and John drew this gag cereal box entirely separately of each other. Crazy minds must think alike.
Speaking of props, the Malvie sisters' Pretty in Pink lemonade branding is a reference to the classic John Hughes movie of the same name.
Jonesy the Cat is another visual nod to the original Alien movie.
Pothole, with his road hazard name, is a parody of the Wimpy Kid character, Speed Bump.
Matt Mattingly, who plays Pothole's unfortunate thug Gino, worked as a production assistant on episode 8. We met Matt by luck when he delivered a pizza to the andyoufilms office.
The newspaper Frank is reading in the scene refers to events in Wimpy Alien 7 and 8, but it never got a clearly visible shot in the final edit.
Slender-Morph was purposefully made an MVP in the villainous plans of this episode, since he had never had an episode of his own. But his sound effects and signature spooky hand wiggle are both callbacks to his appearance in our parody Slender-Man Homecoming, as are the reoccurring themes of his obscure lore and motives.
Just like the Slender-man!
Living Toon Greg was a last-minute addition to the first draft of the script. Up until the moment the scene was being written, the story outline just said, "Insert a funny failed Pennymorph scare here." The nearness of Greg's physical diary as a lure was what inspired the character. While quickly dismissed by Greg, the Living Toon is reiterating Greg's real fears, which stem from his own identity.
Greg breaking his chains with acid in the dream redux of Jigsaw's trap was directly inspired by the many fan comments asking why he didn't do exactly this in Cabin Slaughter.
We've been asked a few times where Myers-Morph and Slender-Morph are in this shot. We figure they're driving the van.
The best cliffhangers end with the villain succeeding in what they've set out to do. We aim to achieve this by not only having the horror morphs get the best of Greg, but by having Spag finally achieve what they set out to do back in episode 3.
While episode 10 was definitely meant to be part 2 of 2, it was important for us to also make sure it had its own plot, setting, and identity in order for it to deserve being a whole separate episode. Still, its themes are meant to be direct continuations of Greg's concerns in episode 9. The vignettes, for instance, are recreations of Greg's ideal summer as pictured in episode 9's cartoons, and his desire to stay at the Spag facility is a temporary solution to the concerns of belonging he expresses in episode 9.
What if there's just no place for me out there?
Back to the world of Easter eggs, the Spag view screen camera numbers are the various release dates of the Wimpy Alien episodes. Greg's view screen has the release date of the first Wimpy Alien.
The video game Greg plays at the facility features clips from Minecraft in Black, another of our mashup parodies.
Wrong blocks, pal.
While Living Toon Greg appears early and often in this episode, the idea to bring him back was once again a last-minute decision. When writing this episode's final confrontation, the image of Greg fighting himself was too good not to use, and led to the Toon once again becoming a voice for Greg's inner fears.
I don't sound like that!
The Cybermorph was purposefully left out of episode 9, both to keep things simpler in 9, as well as to save something new for 10. As such, his mask was the last prepared. Probably a good thing, since it ended up being the most complicated of them.
Rowley tosses Greg his backpack in this scene just so Greg can have his egg later. As originally scripted, there was a whole sequence in episode 9 where Greg brought the backpack to the neighborhood night fight, and Rowley found it after Greg disappeared, but that proved to be a lot of overplotting. Particularly since the egg was ultimately only needed for the sake of a punchline.
That's literally how you got us into this mess.
Rowley also still has his tiny squirt gun from episode 9. Goodness knows why he thinks it'll be helpful here. And Ripley's "We're here to rescue you" is definitely intended as a Star Wars reference.
The establishing shots of the Spag storage room with the horror morph lineup were another rare all-CG environment for the series. This was done since we never had more than 2 performers for the masked characters available at one time, and also to lend scope to the final battle location, which was actually filmed in a small black-walled fight ring.
Being a part 2 in the same year as Avengers Endgame, we felt we had to include some Avengers references. Predators on your left is the most obvious, but the Neighborhood Kid solidarity salute was inspired by Wakanda, and earlier, Greg quotes one of Captain America's favorite phrases.
I could do this all day.
Manny's first word, being cringe, was established in Greg Responds Volume 5 and is referenced here in Force.
Stop saying that! What does that even mean?
Frank's line,
"That's my son.
is a callback to a line from The Last Claw.
That's my son."
We didn't have Fregley's water balloons on hand when shooting the final battle, so he somehow ended up with Greg's squirt gun.
Jar Jar still being alive was also established in Greg Responds.
Misa got lots of stunt doubles.
And if Dalek Roderick were still in working condition, we would have loved to have included him as well.
Not cool, bro.
The rock music that plays over the final battle was another original composition by John Mondelli based on the series' usual main theme. Bonus fact, John is the songwriter and frontrunner of an amazing steampunk band, The Cog is Dead. Check them out at thecogisdead.com.
The Versus cartoon that begins the epic fight is a direct callback to the Versus shot in episode 4.
The battle pairings are all very deliberate. Roderick fights Jason Morph and Myers Morph since Predator is essentially the blade-wielding bruiser of the alien world. Frank fights Freddy Morph since he had beef with him from episode 5. Susan fights Jiggy Morph since she unwittingly sent Greg and Roderick into his trap in episode 6. Manny fights Chucky Morph since he brought the toys to life. Ripley fights the Cybermorph since they share a father. Rowley kicks Penny Morph in the nuts since, you know, he did that before. And Slender-Morph fights the neighborhood kids since they're all new in episode 9, and he's known for stalking youth.
As Ripley mentions, the SPAC facility is underground beneath the same bunker we saw in episode 8. Guess she's homeless now.
Ending the episode with everyone laughing at something macabre while driving away was another callback to episode 4.
And Living Toon Greg was included here as a possible Easter egg for the future, showing us that Greg's identity issues still matter moving forward. Maybe Pennymorph is still alive out there, but we like to think the toon has genuinely transferred into Greg's subconscious over the course of the episode.
Guess I'm part of you now.
And that's all.
Hope you learned something new.
And thanks for watching. Stay tuned for 50 new things you didn't know about Diary of a Wimpy Alien in like a year or so.
After we get around to making more episodes.
We gotta do that first.
To work!